of indifference in this country to the deaths of the people of color and in these communities. But there's also a double standard in the narrative around gun violence, depending on where it takes place and who's affected by it. When it happens to others in certain pockets of Toronto, it's a tragedy visited upon those who didn't deserve it. When it happens to us in these communities, it becomes our fault. We start blaming the victims. We get the wrong place, wrong time narrative. One reason this double standard is so easy to apply is that the question of why gun violence happens so much in inner cities is brushed over or ignored. There are many factors. The effect of racism on individuals and communities, failed education systems, lack of meaningful engagement in spaces, inequities on all levels, systemic barriers, unaddressed mental health and well-being, high unemployment, and no interruption of the violent cycles which are happening within the homes of our young people and within our communities. These are rarely discussed. And there is no connection to that gun violence, and these conversations don't happen on a national level about what's happening to us. Without that connection and with no greater social ills to help explain it, it seems simply as a fault of the people who live in these places. And if they have some defect in their family or in their community, it seems like it's us that's broken and not the system that we're housed in. And because it's our fault, it doesn't warrant that conversation. There continues to be a devaluing of lives for people of color. The recent gentleman that died, Kevin, who was 20 years old, shot down near Islington. First thing that came out, he was known to police. This continues to contribute to the sporadic nature of gun control conversations itself. Because gun control is only talked about on a higher level when multiple murders happen or when it happens into places where they thought were safe or in richer neighborhoods, it's talked about only a few times a year. So if the conversation was shifted to include the tragedies of people in our communities, if our lives were valued enough by media as well as the Canadian conscience to warrant that conversation, this would be an ongoing debate. Our flags will remain at half-mast, and there would be so many moments of silence, it would disrupt people's workday. Okay, like it would disrupt the normal routine that everyone seems to just jump right back into once one of us have fallen. And I want that disruption. Because that disruption will cause some actual actions, and then those will be taken to create some actual change. And it would do something to affect those who are actually affected by the daily gun violence that's happening. So the death of my brother, our brother, because he was family to many in the community, and the deaths of the other innocent lives are a cause for uprising. The loss of innocence of our children every time they're subjected to this sort of horrific act is a cause for an outcry. We must use this as a catalyst for something greater. So I'm no longer asking politicians or anyone else for their moments of silence. I don't need any more silence. I need their voices to be heard. I need our voices to be louder, and I need them to break that silence that has affected our communities and that has caused fear in our communities. And that is all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Tamasha, for your bravery, your courage, your strength to share, and the family that's here as well. And thank you. We wanted to create some space for folks to ask maybe a few questions of each speaker, and then we will open up to a larger conversation. Did anybody, and we'll keep going as well, did anybody have any questions for Tamasha?
And it's cool. It's heavy, it's real. We don't talk about a lived experience in such a real way, in a timely way. So thank you, Tamasha. Our next speaker we're inviting is Sam. Sam was right here. So I think what's really powerful about this discussion is the response from what's happening in the world. The discussion, planning this meeting and bringing people together and thinking about who could speak to these issues in an authentic, lived way, really highlighted the magical people in this neighborhood that have been committed in this neighborhood from birth, right? From birth. And who continue to come back into the neighborhood and give back in some way. So Sam, that's all the filler I got. So in September, our first Wednesday in September, we do have a JFAAP membership drive, so we'll make more announcements. If you want to be a member of JFAAP, that's supposed to happen later. So how's the food? Everybody enjoy the food? Yes? Okay, we'll do another unplug for Black Creek Community Farm. You want to, hey, Black Creek! Fresh organic food. I'm getting excited. I don't think Linda's going to. So it's located at, you guys know where it is, right? The farm is on Jane before Wilson, not Pioneer Village. You guys know, right? Jane and Steele. Jane, oh, the other home. Jane and Steele. On Jane, not Pioneer Village. Sam? In October of 2018, JFAAP is having her 10-year anniversary.
Woo!
Yes, 10
Yes.
years. Yes, that's big.
Yes.
Making our voices louder. And you know what? A lot of this work that we've been doing the last 10 years couldn't have been done with the partnership of community. So like we have some members from No Man's Land in the house, the theater group from back in the days. But have men in the group now and they're not unified anymore. Okay, so that's No Man's Land. We also have, what else? Yes. Oh, so Errol's been taking pictures. Errol there, so it's a little too late. I don't sing. I'm not a rapper. But maybe No Man's Land might have a piece. No Man's Land? Okay, I'm trying. Is there any? Yes, let us know. Oh yes, please. The Black Creek Community Farm Group, where you go along, you want to join the group?
Yeah, so we do have the Black Creek Community Farm gone through every Wednesday from 4 o'clock till around 6. Today at the farm we made pesto from scratch. Oh, it was nice. We picked our own garlic and herbs and all of that and made that from scratch. Starting the third week of August to end of September, we're going to be doing Zumba and eating structure. So, and it is free admission. So if anybody's interested in your mom, feel free to come and enjoy.
Okay, so Sam is making his way. There we go. Yes, let's show some love for Sam.
Sorry. I have to quit. Okay, so hi, yeah, I guess I'll try to just talk a little bit and read a little bit. So my name is Sam. I'm a resident. I grew up in 15 February, and I guess we've been having meetings like this since I was 12. So for a long time. So all of my comments and the ways I think about the stuff that we're I guess gathered here to discuss is from the vantage point of marginalized communities, right? And we used to call them priority neighborhoods or at-risk neighborhoods. If you guys know them, young about, do you know what we call them now? They've always been marginalized, at-risk, priority. Now the city calls them neighborhood improvement areas. And now we have a Toronto Strong neighborhood strategy. So what I always think about is that in order for a community, so an area, so let's say Jane and Finch, or any of the many that we have across the city, in order to be considered at risk or priority, is that means you would have had to be neglected for so long. So how we get places, not only the stigma, but places like these, that look like these, with housing that looks the way they do, with grocery stores that look like the way they do, or neighborhoods that have crumbling infrastructure, I think we need to understand that means that previous levels of government, all levels of government, all political stripes, would have had to neglect us. Would have had to neglect us, right? They would have had to continually disinvest from us. They would have had to tell us, you don't matter. And that happened, I know, before I got here, right? So conversations like these and their necessity continue to be important. And I really appreciated Tamasha's talk, if I pronounced that correctly, because we think about often like the individual ways that this kind of stigma affects us, right? But also knowing that this has never been our fault, that has never been our doing, but we carry that weight on our back, right? So when conversations around violence happen, so I don't actually myself think about the individual acts of violence that gets the city riled up, because like Tamasha said, the Prime Minister's not coming to our memorials, right? The memorials on Danforth, he'll visit that, but our memorials, which have been going on and on, sometimes the media will pay attention and most of the time they don't. Those happen because our communities are what they make. Our lives to our governments, municipal, provincial, and federal, in many ways are disposable. So if the violence that I would consider violence, like crumbling housing, or inadequate schools, or parks where kids don't feel like they can play. I work with a program out of Westview, and I did a workshop recently with all guys. So we're doing stuff around masculinity, conversations of violence, and they're telling me where they play. They tell me they don't play outside anymore. And that literally broke my heart. That's violence, right? So if we're getting housing to the point where we can't even repair it, we need new housing, but we've let the housing that we have, or I should say they, is so poor that we can't even repair it. To me, that's long-term violence. That's structural violence, right? So I think if we start our conversation there, we have a very different conversation. We have a very different conversation than, oh, it's just this one person or this individual violence, which I think is ways that we take care of them. We discuss that, but also when we're talking about communities, we need to have that conversation. So I just want to read a little bit, if that's okay, and you guys can yell out and tell me if it makes sense or not. But here, so I wrote this. These have been, I put this on my blog, but some of you guys read it, hopefully it's okay. I think these have been difficult times for Black and racialized communities in our city. More than ever, I spent the last few days wondering why so much of us, at least my generation and many previous, we really rep Toronto hard. I think we're very proud of Toronto, but I should have known. There's a story I always tell about my dad when we lived in Togo, and he would tell the family members to come visit. And he would tell them we live at Tecle and Finch. And then they would get on the phone, it's like, which buildings are it? It's like, come a little bit more. And that's how we learn so quickly from the landscapers, right? These immigrant parents and communities, when we come, we learn quick what people think about where we live. But that also means that other people understand where we live. And when a first-time provincial minister comes to a community wearing a bulletproof vest that he's never been to, that says more than just his basic level of understanding. That PR-wise, that's just stupid. But that also tells him and his constituents and the rest of his government that that's also a no-go for investment, for thinking about structural reform, for thinking about the fact that we've had these conversations in 2005, right? After what we call the summer of the gun, which for many communities was a year of violence, right? So the many of those responses that came from things like that, or when the violence gets too close to, if we want to be very real, to white areas of leisure and enjoyment like Queen Street or Danforth, or if it gets too close to the Eaton Center, that means that our communities are going to get more violence by 200 police officers, 45 more cameras, and spot shutter technology, right? So those type of investments, and like Tavis, which if you work with young people in communities like these, Tavis was a horrible 10 years, right? Experience. Where these police officers, and it's happened to me, I'm sure probably many people in the room, where they just randomly stop you, question you. That tells you something about whether your city loves you, right? Or your country, and what you might be pushed to do because of the everyday experience of violence. So that's the things I think about, and how currently now, the current context, after all of these decades of things that we've been, I guess, pushed to endure or to live through, now it's a different attack, right? So that we see how Queen's Park and Ford is at a moment where City Council has a potential of looking different, right? There's a lot of there's 3 new wards, there's a lot of candidates, young people like us that have gone through the experience, who decided to throw their hat in the ring. And at that exact moment, we have a premier who says, in the election period, yeah, we're just going to go with 25. And all of the councillors that have supported that motion are white, and they're political dynasties. And they tend conservative. So what little control we have of how our communities look at City Hall is very much under attack. And I think meetings like this to discuss how we do what we've always been doing, taking care of each other, becomes all the more important. So I think that's important. So I'll just continue for a little bit. Okay. So I've been thinking about how we really have unconditional love for this place, for Toronto, but they have a cheap recognition for us. And sometimes that's enough to hold us in its spelling bind. I'm guilty too of mistaking this cheap recognition for the real thing, because when my deep love for Toronto gets tested and stretched real thin, as it very often does, I tell myself, Toronto's beautiful, even when it's not. And lately that saying is not offering the same solace or pleasure it used to. Lately it's been ringing hollow and empty. And I've been thinking about how we ride so hard for this place when it stays trying to keep beating us down, all of us down to dust. I usually work to reach for more tact, grace, and refinement, but I think the collective response from this moment, from our mayor, chief of police, premier, and prime minister, I'm just filled with rage. So I'm thinking to myself that my love for Toronto is dead. In response to highly publicized recent events in our city, Mayor Tory and Chief of Police Mark Saunders held a joint press conference on July 12th. And they announced that they were calling their gun violence reduction plan. Broadly speaking, Chief Mark Saunders said the Toronto Police Force's plan included, among other things, adding more frontline resources during certain days between the hours of 7 p.m. and 3 a.m. when most of the gun violence takes place across the city. More police officers in black communities will just inflict more violence on black and racialized communities. And TBS, they've always said, Toronto Police, that their best intelligence gathering tool has always been, I think Tamasha mentioned it, carding. They've always said that their best intelligence tool is carding. We know in places like here, carding never stopped. So now we get we die, and I wrote that police literally get overtime. And the number one line item in this city's budget is policing. So this happened in 2005. We had one of our members of our community die in a public school. A whole roots of violence report with all of these recommendations about a holistic, plan about neglect, about access to groceries, about public transportation, about racism in schools, about a whole. I had it written down, but I know you guys know. I know you know. We know how this place looks. It's not supposed to look like this. And when they're talking about building $1 billion park downtown, but we're tearing down houses in our community. So to me, that is legitimate violence. So I think when we think about that, and we think about that we're on not even half attack or PR, play with words, Doug Ford is coming for us and our communities in no uncertain terms. So the ways that we've always done, and I've always said, that Finch always teaches me how to take care of each other and my people and community. That's going to be even more serious. So meetings like this, when we think about what these police are going to do, 7 p.m. to 3 a.m., these kids already don't play outside. They're not going to go outside. The police are not going to want them to go outside. So they're basically giving us a curfew for our kids. So I'm wondering the different ways of how we take care of each other. And I do have one positive thought, I remember. On August 14th, 15 years ago. Does anybody know what happened in the city? You guys remember? The blackout. I only remember because August 14th is my birthday. But I had an exam at York, and it didn't happen. We didn't know what's going on. I walked home, and it was completely dark. But then I walked along Jane Street. Anybody remember what was happening on Jane Street 15 years ago? It was a party. Bonfires, people were taking meat out of the fridge. They're like, yo, it's gonna go bad anyway. Grilling it. I was walking down the street and people were throwing, oh sorry, I don't eat bacon, but I'll go over here. And it was a legit party. And every time I said, when the revolution comes and everything is burnt down, I'll be in jail. Because we know how to take care of each other when we don't know what the hell is going on. Everything. And this is before like we could put it on blast like social media. It wasn't like lit live yet. But I was walking down Jane Street and I was legitimately surprised. And I always think there's something about the ways these structures have always been violent. But there's ways in which we've always been like huddled in and close in the way they build communities. But then we also make concern and care for each other. So I hold on to that as it doesn't look like in a bleak time in a bleak condition. So I'm thinking about that, and I could definitely leave it right there and take some questions. But I definitely want to appreciate the organizers even inviting me and having me. Sorry I was late. I was running around. Thank you so much.
Tamasha, Sam got nervous. He saw your printed paper, so he had to go run and bring his paper. I had this one before. I had this. I'll just play with Sam. Any questions for Sam? He's making me nervous. But we can still, if you think about it, we can ask some questions, we can have bigger conversations. Thank you, Sam, for all of your reflections and leaving us with a little bit of hope and positivity and reminding us of the great things that we do here. So up next, we have another amazing speaker who's also been a long-time resident of the community. Cheryl will also introduce herself a little bit. We didn't ask for bio, so we just want you to introduce yourself. Yeah, however you feel comfortable.
And I have the most paper. So high if I sit. No. I've had a really rough week. I'm really exhausted, and I don't think I was able to prepare for this as I would have liked. So bear with me. And it was really tough to sit and listen to Tamasha. So sorry for your loss. I think, as a community, we all feel the loss when one of ours is taken that way. So, I'm Cheryl Prescod. I'm the ED here at Black Creek. But I'm no longer a resident of the community, but I did live in this community. I raised my children in this community for a long time. And I still feel part of the community. So when I come to work every day, I come, as a mother, as a friend, and I see all of the folks who come through our doors as really important and valuable people. But I know that when a lot of our clients come in our doors, they're coming from places where maybe they don't get the treatment that they deserve as human beings because they're thought of as lesser than, because maybe they're a new immigrant to this country, new or old. Maybe they have different skin color. They don't speak English as well as others. So I do know that there's differential treatment of people in our society. So I'm going to get to what I was asked to talk about. Mental health. Butterfly sent me some notes around what I need to talk about: mental health, criminalization, social and economic determinants of health, also about how race and gender might intersect with these issues. So I'm going to talk a little bit way up here about the mental health system. I'm going to talk a bit about policing, and then I'm going to also share a personal story that I had with this issue. So, So first, let's talk about how the city's response recently has been to the gun violence. We heard of an announcement of investments of $8 million to address or to combat gun violence. But I was sad to say that 7.1 million of this is for enforcement and surveillance. Only about 1 million of that will go to community initiatives. Then our new provincial government announced a major investment of 1.9 billion, not million, for mental health and addictions. The federal government will add to that, making it a total of 3.8 billion, with most of it to deal with how police and other responders deal with people experiencing mental health. So, now, what about the needs of the mental health for mental health services? We've got about 12,000 children and youth in Ontario waiting for services. The wait time is over a year for most of these. And if we don't address these issues, we know that later on they will lead to other issues that are probably physical. Again, we see this every day with people coming into our center with diabetes, high blood pressure, and a lot of it was caused by stress. Stress that was worsened by things like living in inadequate housing conditions, not even having access to housing, inadequate jobs, having to work many jobs to make a living, and not having enough time even for their children who may be experiencing mental health and addictions. Now, hearing that, remember that most of the investments that the government is making to mental health is not into community programs and prevention programs, it's to policing, surveillance, and enforcement. Okay, so next, I just want to talk, I'm going to just go through a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to talk about the police response to people who are dealing with mental distress. Not mental health, mental distress. While we know that we have a large number of gun deaths resulting in deaths, gun violence resulting in deaths, we know that a recent statistic was that 73% of those had a mental health or addictions condition. Some of them were actually killed by police violence, police gun violence. And I want to read the names of some of them that you might have heard of. So since 1988, at least 12 families have lost loved ones in mental distress killed by Toronto police officers. In memory of those individuals and out of respect for their families, it's important that we don't forget their names or when we lost them. Most recently, Andrew Luku in 2015, Sammy Yatim, Michael Ellington, Rial Jardine Douglas, Byron Devassi, O'Brien Christopher Reed, Otto Vass, Tony Andrade, Edmund Yu, Wayne Williams, and in 1988, Lester Donaldson. Now, most of these individuals were male. A lot of them were people of color, mostly black males. And I wanted to talk about Rial Jardine Douglas. He was born on April 7th, 1985, and he was shot and killed by the police on August 29th, 2010. Now, Rial was my nephew, and Rial was dealing with some mental health distress, and his sister called the police, and his mom called the police to help them get him to a hospital. Rial was a quiet young man who was very bright, and I remember when Rial started expressing some mental health issues. It was after he was in school, and one of his teachers asked him why he had braids in his hair. Was he a girl? After that time, Riel, started acting out a bit. He actually took a pair of scissors to school one day because he wanted to cut his braids off. And of course, you know what happened. He was caught with scissors and he was suspended. And this was in grade 7. And actually, that fact came up in the investigation because, of course, this could not be an innocent black man that was killed. He had to be a criminal. So in grade 7, when he was caught with a pair of scissors in his backpack and suspended from school, that was what defined him. So fast forward to August 2010, when Riel's sister and his mom were worried about his increased agitation because he was having some paranoid episodes. They called the police and said, my brother just boarded a bus and he's got mental health issues. We need some help to get him to the hospital. About half an hour later, they received a call that your brother is dead. We need us at Sunnybrook Hospital. And I'll never forget the day that we received the call that Riel is dead. And again, just because he was a young man who was not able to control some of his actions at the time. His mother and his sister and his dad, who was my brother, sat through an inquest, many hours of testimony, where they heard about how police have been trained and how they've received so much training based on previous inquests. However, the officer that shot Riel was protecting himself, because that is what they do. They were trained that when someone is advancing on them with a sharp weapon, they do not consider their mental state, they protect themselves and the public. So, his mother and sister testified that even after going to the hospital, the police did little to comfort them, to offer them any explanation or counseling. His mom questioned whether the officer had done anything at all to calm her son down before opening fire. She actually said, I'm thinking, we called 911 and we told them that he had mental health issues, but no one spoke to him, no one talked to him. And when we got to the hospital, he was just a dead young black man, and they offered nothing. Families and communities dealing with this issue, and there are many families and there are many communities that are left to deal with this on their own. The funding, the investments that go into the inquests and into the investigations does not help our communities and our families. I remember one of the recommendations from the inquest into this was that we should collaborate with consumer survivor groups to identify gaps in community supports for improved management of mental health issues in the community, and we should develop more and more programs. However, when we hear news, especially in the last few months, that the funding, the billions of dollars of funding will go into policing, enforcement, and surveillance, I think we all have to ask a few questions. I'll end there because I'd like us to be able to talk a little bit about this, because it is important that we have these opportunities. And I really, for the number of years that I've lived and worked in this community, I look around rooms like this and I look at the people who are always coming out, and I wish that we were given more, you were all given more credit and more support to do this kind of work. It's not right what happens to our brothers, our sisters, our sons, our daughters. We didn't talk a lot about our daughters because but we know what happens to some of our daughters in this community, and we have to work together. It's not right, and we've got to come together on those issues. So, as the executive director of this organization, I take it personally, but I also am committed to that despite the racism, despite the gender discrimination that happens to a lot of us, we have to keep standing up, keeping our heads high, and fight for each other. Thank you.
So maybe I can also ask Tamasha and Sam. Sorry, this wasn't part of the plan, but we just think maybe it's a little easier to move the one mic around maybe, and then if that makes sense for people. So maybe some more love. So we open it up for community. Sister, did you have a question with that?
Yes, I think you touched on something, the last speaker, and it would be interesting to hear the perspective from all who were speaking. You indicated there are things that happen to our daughters, and oftentimes our daughters are excluded from that public engagement. So if there's something specific to this area, to this community that you feel that is affecting our daughters, I would like to hear about that.
We know that when the celebrities talk about sexual harassment and sexual violence, the world listens. But we don't know that when our young girls are violated or abused, that go to lengths, maybe because their lives are not, they don't have resources, and they have to make some difficult choices that really affect their lives. We don't talk about it. We have to have spaces to talk about it. We know that gender-based violence is a big issue in this community. We know that poverty among women, especially women who are parenting and have children, is a big issue. There's so much that we can say, and we don't have enough time today to probably go through it all, but we do have to think about them as well.
Just to add to that, one of the things that we've seen, one of the trends or one of the pieces that are on the rise that we're finding with our young women is the trafficking that's happening. And we don't always speak about it because as of right now, due to a lot of the things that are happening in music videos, it's almost become popular. It's become the way for them to make money. The idea or the concept of being that video vixen, well, they're also being, like raped, or all these other things are happening to them on a regular basis in turn for a little bit of money, and they are being exploited, but we don't completely speak about it, but it is definitely on the rise, and it's definitely affecting the young women in our communities. Another thing that's affecting our young women is those cycles of violence that we speak about, and it's the domestic violence that is happening in homes and them being subjected to it. So when the young women are seeing this, and although it may not be immediate, there's a long-lasting effect and something that plays out for them, that they begin to feel that it's okay for them to be treated that way. And then so in turn, when they raise young children or young men as well and young females, it almost becomes the norm. So I think those are two of the things that are affecting our young women right now.
I just wanted to add to that, if it's okay. We started the panel with talking about some of the intersections of race and gender. And one of the issues in relation to young women in our community when we think about things like carding, right, we often hear how there's, stopping people on the street, or particularly thinking about young boys, young black boys, or young men of color. But this also happens to women. The police have also been tracking and surveilling young girls, sisters, girlfriends, mothers. To do this, they have programs in our elementary schools. So they have programs in our elementary schools tracking young girls, getting information on their families, on their brothers, on people that they love. So, the police are working in all of these institutions that are failing us, when the police do raids, they break down mothers' doors. They also scoop up sisters, they scoop up moms. So women are also directly impacted through the constant surveilling in our community.
Hello, thank you everyone for sharing. I work at Humber River Hospital, and we are developing an equity and inclusion strategy. So part of it is doing work with staff, but the other part is thinking about our social responsibility with the community. Breaking it. I'm sorry. So as I was talking, not to repeat myself, but I'm trying to see how healthcare and what your opinion is in terms of where a hospital like Humber River can be a partner to the community in terms of addressing the issues that were brought up today.
Okay, I would say, so not only am I a resident, but I do currently work for the city. And one of the things that we are working on is that violence prevention plan for our youth. A piece of that would be that tackling of that violence interruption and intervention. I think where a hospital can fit in is when we're looking at the treatment of our young people when they get to the hospitals, as well as whenever there are, whether it's a gunshot victim that comes into the ER, offering different supports while they're there, other than the police kind of standing there over them. If there's something else that can be put in place during that time, as well as the treatment of families when they walk into those hospitals, wondering what's happening with their sisters, brothers, nephews, cousins, just that overall customer service and treating us like human beings when we walk into a hospital when we're already facing some of the trauma from someone that has been affected by gun violence. And I think, again, with that sort of interrupters model, right now, if you're using what's been based out there, the hospitals are tied to other community services and assisting with that. So, like whether it's the mental health pieces or again, like I said, when it's those emergency rooms, it's connecting. And I would very much like to connect with you in order to get some of that work done so that we can start tackling some of those pieces.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think, not to be a killjoy, but I'm always a killjoy. I think we need to be very critical and skeptical of equity and diversity plans generally, right? Because I think this gives us this perception that things are changing, right? So one, be critical. I know this is people's jobs, people got to do their work. But what I would not want is the window dressing to change, right? So I just need to racialize and diversify the staff, which usually is not even racial or diverse, but anyway. So that might be one step. But also the idea, the thinking, the how you make up the idea of what health might be, right? Or harm reduction, or violence reduction, right? So I've been in the hospital when we've had brothers, community members shot. And the way they treat you is like, I would swear, but like crap. So if we're thinking about violence as a public health crisis, that means that all of those people that came in that hospital, family members, cousins, girlfriends, people on the streets, friends, community workers, those are all your patients. So when you come in, those are all your patients, you treat them with respect, love, and care. That's not even getting to the medical stuff, right? But then this the automaticity of calling the police. I know the health experts are here, so you guys can tell me, but I know that that's probably a policy. I just don't know if that has to happen right away. until you've taken care of people, right? And then I've been in the hospital too when people have been shot, and everybody thought that that person was a gang member or whatnot. Then it gets in the news, and then everybody flips the script. That's violence too, and that should not happen, right? That should not happen. Because they're all our sons and daughters, all of them. So I think about how the hospital can become a place, if it really wants to, a place of community, of loving care, of dealing with these people first, and then the policies and all that after. That can be as real as it can be for you, but I don't know in your role in the professional capacity. But people remember that stuff. They're not going to walk into a hospital and they have mental health issues. People, like I know people who tell me I'm not walking back into home. We have many stories about Humber from when it was at Finch. Many stories. I worked at Humber as a security guard. I tell everybody not to go to the hospital. Yes, I'm serious. I'm serious. When I was working there as a security guard, 100%. And they knew it's the same thing when they walk into schools. And our schools treat people like crap. So I'm thinking about just how we can humanize that space at the first point of contact. Because in people's lives, that's all they're going to remember of the healthcare institution. So I'm thinking about, I'm even living through those moments again right now, thinking about, I know those people's faces at Sunnybrook. I'll never forget those things. That's what I'm thinking about when I think about the healthcare institution as being part and parcel of the community.
Thank you for the question, and I think it's important that you're here, but I wish the entire staff of Humber River could be in this room to hear what was just said. Many times, people from this community go into the hospital. I'll talk about, say, for someone that has sickle cell, for example. Sickle cell is a disease that causes tremendous pain. And I know that I've heard stories of people saying that I was not believed when I said I was in pain. I was told that I was on drugs or I was mentally ill because they didn't believe me as a black person. Most of them, again, black male, unfortunately. You know, they're just assumptions made by the way people look. And I think until we can break those assumptions and those stereotypes about certain groups of people, we have to stop it. I've heard it personally. I've seen the way some of the intake workers treat women, you know, who are dressed differently, you know, and ask them, is this okay? Is this what you do in your country? You know, we've got a lot of work to do. I'm so sorry to say, and please come into this community and bring your colleagues into this community so they can learn from this community. Because it's abysmal what happens at that hospital.
Thank you. I think also when we talk about the hospital and we talk about mental health and black men, as a community frontline worker, what I'm seeing in terms of the use of drugs and the similarity of behavior of young men in the psych ward and the men on the block. And we need to start talking about this in intervention, prevention, but in healthy ways that don't further criminalize these people. Because what's happening is you're being surveillanced by the police in the parking lot instead of engaging the community health center, right? So like, let's start thinking about this. Is there any other questions? Yes,
Thank you to the organizers and the speakers. Just want to say first off, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm brand new to this city, I should say. I came from Vancouver. There are actually no black people in Vancouver, so it's been really nice to hear. I actually think there might be more black people in this mall, maybe in this room right now. You know how they say, like especially black men, we give the nod when you see another black person. I've been given the nod, so I'm not used to giving the nod this much. I've been having like neck issues. Anyways, I wanted to ask, we got a city election coming up, and Doug Ford just announced recently that they're cutting the number of city councilors almost in half. From 44 right now, it's going to go to 47, now it's 25, it's going to be 25. Very likely, I mean, there's going to be legal challenges, but I don't think that's going to be successful. What, if any, effect will this have on
do you guys think is going to happen if we have less local councillors? So if we less, like almost half. Yes.
So I just want to say, like, how many of us like actually engage with our council? So for you try to, but so I think if we think about like city council actually potentially changing the way that they might look at this, I think that's what people are nervous about. People like for. I mean, actually looking because city council has been very slow, not by accident, and they don't engage because they don't care about our issues, right? And there's this theory, like in municipal elections, that only the people whose issue, whoever show up, that's the only people that the councilors will answer to, and the only people that show up are the people who, you know, have nice houses, have cars, and know that the councilor, when they pick up the phone, they don't need caller ID, they know who's calling them. So that's it, right? When we call, we gotta go protest in front of the councilor's office, and oh, that day he's at City Hall or something. You know what I mean? So we have to like fight for attention. But going down to 25, that's just gonna be worse. My opinion, I think. So I don't know what you guys think, but already we get by without him. Is what it is. But it had a little inkling, a little potential, maybe looking different. And I think that's what they're doing. This is a very unprecedented move in an election period. Like the election started, okay? And now like, they're taking boxes away to balance. Instead of 2 or 3 councilors in this area, it's going to be 1. That's incredible. And the same thing for the trustees. The province gave the order to the boards, and they're all off in the summer to redistrict the boards for the trustees according to the 25. So even now, our TDSB, like our board trustees are Catholic, are going to be even more difficult to serve us. So I think we have to think about what, like, they're unprecedented, so we can be unprecedented in our reaction, in our response. All right, so.
Sam, can you just maybe clarify for everyone what actually took place?
What do you mean, in the slashing of the...
Not everybody's watching the news, not everybody's politically engaged.
Oh, okay, for sure. So, you guys want to? Okay. In the city of Toronto, we had like 44 councillors. So the city's broken up across the city, from Scarborough to downtown to Lakeshore to Steeles. And we have like 44 councillors now. We were going to go to 47. And a bunch of councillors were either moving on or stepping away. And there was 3 new like wards, and a lot of people of color, active people, community people were saying, I'm going to do it, I'm going to jump in. So across the city, you kind of had like a wave that maybe that people that look like us, that we might actually give the nod to, or go talk to, you know, who might be wearing, female might be wearing a hijab, had chances. And even downtown, we had labor activists and anti-racist activists making a bunch of buzz and noise. And I'm pretty sure they heard that at Queen's Park and said, instead of the 47, not even the 44 that we had, they cut it in half and said, we're just going to go with 25. Like, and that had to leak, and then, you know, they weren't even going to tell us. So this is what real power can do when they don't give a crap about what we think. Like, no consultation, nothing. So that means instead of at least 47 people in a city of 2.8 million, we're going to have 25. And most likely, they're probably going to be mostly white and male. And no Ford real well. And rich.
In a larger area, it costs a lot to run for anything. Even trustees, you know, it costs a lot to run. But if you double the size of the area, it costs twice as much. Just out of reach of people who accept that you have a lot of money. And well, things will be done for those people, not us.
So yeah, these are all the different issues, the disparity with who will get to run, more rich, less representation. But I think like what Sam spoke about earlier, you know, like take for example our housing being in a state of disrepair. Well, that was because in the 90s when my parents decided to amalgamate, so make all of the municipalities, all of the cities into one big city, right, the Greater Toronto Area, the housing that was once run by the province was now offloaded onto the city. Then the city didn't have the funding that was necessary to continue to fix, repair, and maintain that housing. So we still see that housing is in disrepair because of this one major political move. So, like Sam said, we have politicians. We've gone to their offices with petitions. So many times we just show up. They're never there, so we don't know what's happening. We've existed. When there's an event, they come to they come to the events and take a picture and then they leave. But we've learned to exist and get by. But what happens to our community, we feel the real effect of housing falling apart. We see our schools falling apart because of the same kind of amalgamating the city. And again, this will also impact our schools because this means the boundaries will have to get expanded for our schools. So it means less people taking care of our schools, less people taking care of our housing. They don't really care about that. They care about their pockets. So
we need another blackout.
We need another blackout. We can organize for that.
So does that mean that there's going to be more kids per classroom in the schools?
The number of kids per classroom is set by the contract and by the province and a number of things. So there may not actually be a number of kids. Will there be more will there be any hall monitors? It's not.
It's just more photocopy, textbooks, more tar falling through the roof on our students. Like this is all news, right? This is all news that's happening in our schools. So it's just worse, more of it. Less teachers, more disengaged. There's already a room to roll things. So, and what could possibly happen is a school board that would look two, like north and south. So the south part will be downtown core. So those schools will likely be stronger than the schools in the suburbs where it's people like us. Yeah. So just is there a question over there? Mayor Jane Finch? Mayor without office.
Good evening, everyone. I have a question about disease. Talking about disease, they are sure no disease is stopped. They know very well every disease they have medicine. Why don't healthy people who don't die? You use this medicine, finish. Use this one, use this one, use one. He died, not my job. I want to answer about the disease. Where is it? From where coming? They can heal the disease. Why don't work very well, and then to work very well. Why they cheating the people? Don't healing the people from cancer all. Medicine, 25 years in Canada, I eat 24 years medicine. In our country, no tablet, no disease, nothing. Because it's worse, food, chemical, everything. So thank you very much. I'm sorry about my language, not my language. I follow my language.
Put the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's really Mayor without the office. I think it's really, really important contribution, right? Like, we know even in this community, the cost of food is so much. To access healthy food is so much, unless you go to Black People Community Farm. But in our local grocery stores, the cost of healthy food is so expensive. More expensive than anywhere else in the city. Baby formula's locked up. Are the medicines locked up? They want to keep us dependent on the medicines and the formula, but these things are locked up. And they have police in the grocery stores following us. I missed the top. Oh, you want to answer? Maybe pharmaceuticals and justice.
You know, what you say is right. We do depend on a lot of chemicals and medicines, whereas we know that if we have healthy lifestyles, like healthy food, access to healthy food, places like parks where we can walk, communities where we feel safe, then we can be in our parks and we can meet our neighbors, we can exercise. Those are things that keep us healthy. But also, it's about being treated like human beings and being treated with respect. Because there's nothing worse than our young children growing up being made to feel like they're not worth anything. We need our children in schools. We talked about the schools and the buildings, but we also need teachers and educators and everyone who interacts with children to treat them fairly so that they don't grow up being angry and you know, thinking that they're not worth anything. That's what causes a lot of our disruption within our communities. We need places like this where, look around, you know, we have people from probably every country speaking different languages. We come together and we have conversations, we have respectful learning interactions with each other. That's what we need. We need to feel safe, and I think that helps us with our health.
We'll keep having that conversation. But maybe we could ask, not here, I don't know. The blackout, they'll come out. When there's a blackout, everyone will come. We have to call them real health warnings in here.
Can you repeat it so everybody can hear what he said? Could you repeat it?
So I think what Mr. Mayor was saying is that they keep giving you medication. Mayor of that office, they keep giving you medication, little food, no jobs, sending you all over the place, just keeping people in this constant cycle with no solutions.
So that's very true, Mr. Mayor. With no office. So it is a rat race. You know, these systems are coordinated for us to just keep running behind our tail. You know, referral to next referral, but we need to do meaningful and deeper work. We will do it with your leadership. Thank you very much. Okay, you're up. Okay, I see there's a hand here though. Yes.
Well, it wasn't really a question, but it was just basically replying to that, right? So. So I just wanted to reply to your comment. When we talked about why are there so many
Closer to the mouth.
right? It's because what we have is a practice of containing is fostering. And any doctor will tell you that prevention is the best cure. So if we're seeing a lot of diseases because we're not investing in social services, we're constantly visiting the social network. As we see it also recently, we're cutting any form of investment towards communities. As we discussed earlier, radically put towards issues like supporting mental health support, supporting education. If you look at the Toronto District School Board, there's over a $4 billion backlog. These things would have ensured that everyone would have the ability to thrive by investing in the beginning with early childhood education is so important. So what we need to do is go after our policymakers to ensure that they are held accountable. So what we need to do is actually act on October 22nd and vote in those individuals who would actually ensure that these things occur. Do not, in fact, be demoralized, because this is exactly what they want.
Hold the mic closer. Hold the mic closer. Because you can't really hear enough for video camera. Can't see. Always check with me because I can indicate to you to hold it closer. Because what you said was so awesome, but I don't know if it got picked up on camera.
Can you hear me all right? So there's some fundamental questions that we need to consider. Many of you might not know that I have a long background in nursing. I've nursed as a registered nurse in this country since 1964. And I trained in my country, Guyana. I worked in England. And I was recruited to come here and work as a nurse. So I've worked at many of these hospitals here, including this one. And I've worked in psychiatry. But one of the earliest programs that we had was a crisis intervention team.
Hold the mic closer.
In Hamilton, we started out with that crisis intervention team. Whenever there was an incident, I went to the Hamilton Psychiatric Hospital. And we come out with maybe a doctor, meaning the nurses, with a doctor and a social worker, and we intervene. Whether the person had a gun, knife, or otherwise. There were no police involved. And we handled those situations, we dealt with those individuals. But just last night I saw, and maybe you might have spoken to this already, after the Great Emancipation Day celebration, right, we had a young man taken down by security guards at the TTC. A young black man, again. And I've seen alternate members of these issues. And there were 4 of them sitting on his hand, restraining him. Within his hand, they couldn't put his hand behind his back, and he didn't march it back forward. And I'm saying that to say that this is a very difficult case. I know when Cheryl's mother was killed by police. And one of the things she talked to me about that situation, I can't get used to this. I'm used to using my hands, and so if you have a microphone stuff on here, I might get it. But I understand the pain and the grief that comes to suffering mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles. And I don't know whether you can ever get over this grief. But when you're there to see a police officer sitting on your son, usually typically back there, with his knees in his back or on his face back, and they're covering him when no one is watching. And even when you're watching, they do that also. And I'm saying that unless we take back our city and take back the responsibility that those who are being responsible, even not just that, when you're not in the city chambers, whether it's in the provincial or the legislative chambers in Ontario or in Canada, you still have some power, and that wise matter has demonstrated that they're in the Royal Base Charter which embedded was, you were in many of those marches when they were shooting black men, and of course you were opposed. Okay, there's so many questions, but my question to you is here, and that question was posed earlier. Are we going to, and it was raised actually, what would happen ultimately when the council reduced to 20? But I'm going to send that question back to you because one of the things I can say with certainty is that you certainly won't get representation. And as we go back to the earliest days when we had 4 or 5 mayors at least, and city councils in all of these areas that is now called to the Greater Toronto area, right, we have access to the representatives. You could have many matters dealt with, and you need to consider that, you need to review that. And I would say that any other questions that I have, I'll be able to forums, as you know. I'm going to be challenging for the speaker, and I'm upset about this fact that you're cutting them back from 44, 47, and not 20. It's outrageous that actually happened. Thank you.
time for us to think about our own strategies, to think about our own responses. JFAAP's also committed to continuing this conversation. This isn't a one-off. We know the battle ahead. It is a big one, and to have these conversations are meaningful. So what could be the strategy? How you can also become a member, and also join JFAAP and the actions and the work that we do. So how can we take this on? We have a provincial government that has been in not too long. We have our local councillors in neighborhoods with bulletproof vests, not just the directorate. We have, we're seeing the dollars being removed from housing, from school, work that has gone into the 14 and 15 fairness campaign for the last 5-6 years more, under threat. What is it that we can do as a community? We're hearing that, there's been a push. We're seeing more of our faces in this election coming to the table. We saw it at the last election, so the engagement is there. People are taking this chance. What are other ways? What are other solutions or strategies that we also have touched on media and the role of media and how they portray our communities, how they portray challenges, how mental health is deemed criminal, how being a young person and just existing in a neighborhood needs to be policed after 7. What are the strategies? How can we use the media to our advantage? How do we... Strategies. Yes.
I can speak out loud. I don't think so. Okay, Cheryl.
Yeah, and hold it close.
I'm always told that.
No, we have all different kinds of needs, I saw that.
So I'm sorry, earlier I said,
Closer.
people that had difficulties hearing what I was saying. Okay, so I think first and foremost we have to be mindful of language, because language is powerful. And when we describe this matter of gun violence, let's start flipping the narrative. I've had this discussion from Zero Gun Violence movement. Let's call this a humanitarian crisis because there are international human rights conventions, and we are losing our children. We need to define them as children. Once we start defining the gangs, we have demonized them. So this is one step to be in the process of holding our government accountable. So when we talk about gun violence, always make sure to use humanitarian rights and fight.
I think totally so important if we start just with each other. Language, and I'm all for council looking different and the province of Ontario government looking different, but that's going to take a while, a long time. They got old money, they have old property, they got fathers and brothers and whoever that was in politics. But I'm more concerned about like our lateral forms of care. So if we could start talking about our young people, like young people, even if they fall to gun violence, no matter what kind of life they may have led and the choices that they had to make, if we start talking about each other like people, and we start thinking about how we're going to feed each other in different ways, how we might, if we're each in distress or crisis, and we've all been, maybe we don't automatically call the police. Just different ways that we care for each other. I'm definitely all day down for that, and that's nothing more important because I think we had a moment, I think after 2005, to make different investments as a province, as a country. They all came together, all 3 levels of government, and we got tax. And we got police in schools. After a 384 report on roots of violence, that talked about nothing about police in schools. So I'm not waiting for that. But we should work towards that. But I'm just concerned, like, how do we feed and clothe and shelter each other and take care of each other? And like, what if we like weaponize care for each other? Like, I always go back to that blackout, where we were just different ways of making community that doesn't involve waiting for them. I'm definitely down for that. There's nothing more important. Don't tell my PhD supervisor that. But there's nothing more important than us just surviving and working through this moment, because we're on like, this is a frontal attack. This attack for us. So I'm definitely down for that conversation, and we'll keep showing up all the time.
Hello, I'm to be brief as possible. My name is Eddie. I run a program called HOPE, Helping Offenders on Probation Excel. It's to reduce recidivism. When young men of color go to jail and they come out, they have probation and they don't have no one to help them to reintroduce them to society. There's no jobs available. There's no opportunities. That's just what I don't do. But to elaborate on what was said, we need representation. You know, representation, it makes a big difference. We don't have no one to represent our voice. I was last week I was on a panel in City Hall, and it was only two black men in the whole panel of City Hall, and it was majority white women, and they were talking about how they're going to reduce violence in, you know, the neighborhoods where we live in. So when and I only got invited to that by default, but thank God I was there. You know, it was the last minute. Somebody said, "Oh yeah, you doing a book program? Could you come?" I was like, "Of course." But I was disappointed because it wasn't representation there. However, I was able to talk about what were real issues and stuff they don't know about, because they do research and they do statistics, right? And they don't really have a clue what's really going on and how to help, you know. So we need representation. And with that said, we need to inspire young men to get involved, you know. There's no young people here. You know, I may look young, but I'm old. You know what I'm saying? But we need some young people, you know, and I work with a lot of young people that have actually a criminal record and history. And my drive is to reach out and connect with these young men and say, listen, you gotta go. We were at the event, the emancipation thing, and I brought some young people. You gotta come with me. You understand? We need representation, so we gotta go out, and that's my goal, but I'm one person. We all gotta connect with each other and say, listen, let's go in these communities and talk to these guys and try to change their way of thinking, redirect them. With that said, there's a young black man of Caribbean African descent and Indian descent. His name is Nia Singh. He's running for mayor. So if you guys want him to come here and talk about his campaign, and he could answer a lot of these questions, because we already, I was with him in some news interviews and TV interviews and radio interviews, and he was able to answer these questions. But what I'm saying is we need representation. I'm not even saying vote for him. I'm saying listen to him. See if he's talking your language, because if he is, then he could really represent us. Does that make sense? So, oh, he's been there already. Okay, so you kind of see what, you know, but we need representation. And he has a story, he's been from the streets, and he's a lawyer representing people. We're doing the same thing, it's just from different perspectives, you know, and I'm sorry for talking so long, but I want to say this. I'm from the U.S., but I've been here 6 years. I was a police officer. Don't look like it, eh? You know what I'm saying? I used to arrest people, you know what I'm saying? But because it was people of color like me, you know, I felt so like, how am I contributing? I can't do nothing, you know what I'm saying? It is a good job or whatever, but I'm not helping, I can't. So I decided to change my career, like, and you know, like, you know what I'm saying? But now what I'm doing is I'm more effective. You know what I'm saying? And I work with some real street youth, and when I tell them, listen, I was a police, they say, oh my God, no. It's like I betrayed them, you know what I'm saying? I said, you like me or what? Like, you like me, don't you? I'm the same person, you know what I'm saying? It's just I changed my mind. But I was able to now earn respect and fill up. But what I'm saying is we got to connect. You know, I'm here today, and thank God I'm here, but young men, we got to talk, we got to go out there and reach out to these men. We actually got to save our streets. We got to take it back. We can't rely on government, we can't do that. We need self-representation. Thank you.
I'm with you. I think we need local solutions to our problems. And I would like to say that reaching out to a lot of the organizations, representatives of, you know, people who do work in this community, who do paid work in this community, because many of you do unpaid work, and you're always here helping us out. But let's get together instead of competing for the little resources that are coming our way. Let's get together and come up with the right solutions for our community, because it's us. No one cares other than us who live here and who really come here every day and are invested. So reaching out, please take some time to connect with each other before you leave.
So we value that community comes together and speaks about issues, but the difference in speaking is one thing, the other thing is to act on these things. And I think Butterfly asked a great question: where do we go from here? What do we do next? What do we do now? The gentleman mentioned Nia Singh, he is running for mayor. My name is Dion Renee, I also am running for mayor. I'm your mayoral candidate. And this is not here to promote me or anything, but because the gentleman raised it, I understand that Butterfly is also running for councillor in this ward, trustee in this ward, so that means she's on your ballot if you're in 7 and 8. And then you had Mr. LaRose who spoke. He too is running. He's running for councillor in this area. So both his name and Butterfly's name will be on your ballot. And you have the woman who spoke over there. Her name is Naima Farah. She's running in Ward 1, which is North Albion Steeles, right up to the corner there. So,
and Amanda Combs as well in the back there is running.
Wearing the shirt that says Black Votes Matter. So when you're asked what can you do, you can actually go out and vote. Oftentimes they say that we don't vote. And when I ran in 2014, I don't know if you all remember that I ran in 2014 for mayor as well. I was the one that they were kept excluding from the public debates. I was the one that they were only trying to make sure the media knows that there's only 3 people running when there are really 65. The reality is, don't believe everything you see in the media. Take your own initiative to look into things, to make sure that you have the facts, and that somebody's not creating a narrative in your mind as to what you should believe and what you should accept. Time now for no longer drinking the Kool-Aid. It's time now that we take initiative to ensure that we have the ability to live and thrive. So make sure that you tell your neighbor, your cousin, people across the other side of the city of Toronto. It's not limited to one area, it's the entire city. Know that my name is on your ballot. We've been in the streets for a long time. And so have you. We're tired of breaking our backs. We're tired of fighting and having protests and rallies and lying down in the street and blocking up all kinds of things. It's time now to put people like us in positions of power where we can create policies to ensure your life, your life, your life, your life, your children's lives, that we all have the ability to live and thrive. So that is what you can do. And when we call for you, we want you to come. We're never in this alone. It is only together that we will succeed. Do you agree with what I just said? Do you agree with what I just said? Okay, so take action from today forward, knowing that you can help in whatever way you can. It's not always about money. The rich and wealthy white people, no offense to any white people who's rich and wealthy in this room right now, the rich and wealthy white people have their money to get out there and pay you to do this, okay? If you go on my YouTube page, I had a recent interview with someone who said, how are you guys going to make it? People of color who are candidates in this election, you guys don't have money. The rich people can afford to buy signs and do all of this, and in fact get volunteers that look like us to do their work for them, not paid. So how are you going to make it? I said, you know those same people who are doing the work for the rich, wealthy white folks? They can go and do that same work for the people who look like them, who will keep them in mind at the decision-making table. So that's all we ask. We're not necessarily asking for money, but we welcome it. We're asking you for your time, your efforts, your word, your passion, and everything to get Butterfly's name out there to community, to get Winston LaRose's name out there to community, to get Naima Farah, to get, what's her like sister? Amanda Combs' name out there to the public, to get Dion Renee out there to the public, to get Nia Singh out there to the public. There are many candidates of color, and Sam said it. They're getting nervous because we're all coming together. We make up more than 51% of the population in the city of Toronto. So why are we so underrepresented? Ask yourselves that. We can't take what they're giving us no longer, folks. Let's get active, let's get real, and let's continue to ensure that we have the ability to live and thrive.
My name is Louis March. I work across the city of Toronto.
with a group called Zero Gun Violence Movement. How do we get to zero gun violence in the city of Toronto? And a lot of people think this is impossible to happen. And my response to everybody that says that is that we already have zero gun violence in the city of Toronto. But we won't have it in certain communities for certain people. So if you're telling me that we have to accept that certain people can have zero gun violence in their community, and in another community must exist, something is wrong with that. So our work is how do we close the gap so that we all can live in safety. I'm just going to say two things in terms of what we can do moving forward. These type of events are important, where we get together and discuss, share, and learn from each other. But the first word in community safety is community. And this is what's going on here. You just need to do it more and more and more. It's not police, it's not politicians. The first word in community safety is community. Take responsibility for your community. And don't leave it for others to do it for you. They will not. In terms of what can we do moving forward, there's a person that I've met recently. He came out of jail after spending 32 years in jail. He was a notorious gang leader in the city of Toronto. When he got arrested and they finally took him down, there were 30 other people from his gang that went with him. His name is Ricky Atkinson. He just wrote a book called The Dirty Tricks Gang. He always prided himself on being able to outsmart the police, right? And he did a very good job of it. But the other day I asked him straight up, I said, Ricky, was there a time in your life, he's a natural born leader, right? Was there a time in your life that you could have changed it, it could have been switched, that you didn't go down this path of being a gang leader in the city of Toronto, a notorious gang leader? And he said, he didn't even think about it. He answered immediately. He said, yes. And I was surprised. He said, Louis, when I was a young teenager, if there was somebody close to me that had said, Ricky, you're not going to do that. This is what you must do. If there's somebody that influenced him as an early teenager in a positive way, that he respected and valued, his life would have been different. But not only his life, but the life of all the people he hurt as a gang leader, and so the people that were part of his gang. So I reflect back. Our work is about early intervention. We don't want to get to the point where somebody has to pick up a gun or join a gang. And I reflect back at the fact that all the shootings that have taken place in the city of Toronto, even the Eaton Center shooting, there was a point where somebody had done something different, whether it was institutional, whether it was police, was it service providers, whether it was friends, that could have been prevented. I don't have a crystal ball to give to you to tell you where are those early intervention points, where you can change somebody's life or their trajectory. But what I can say is that we've got to look at ourselves now. We're not talking about taking the community back, we're not talking about taking the streets back, we have to take our children back. We have to take our children back. And I'm not only talking about biological children. We have to care and love the children. Ricky, in his early teens, said his life could have been changed if there was somebody strong and firm around him that directed it correctly. And a lot of the young people that we work with on the streets of Toronto, there's a gap that is not there for them. We have a lot of services, we have a lot of organizations, we have a lot of programs, but the population that we need to reach out to and touch, we're not able to do it. Some people are. let's check ourselves, please. The first word in community safety is community. Be strong, stand tall, and don't be afraid. Secondly, when somebody needs help, no one's going to walk around with a sign on their forehead that says, Louis, I need help. But you know the ones. Your experience, you've been around for some time, you know the ones that are looking for help. Don't give them a cold shoulder. Because in giving them a cold shoulder, you're giving the community a cold shoulder, and it's a ticket for violence. Trust me. So no crystal ball to tell you when those moments will be. You know them. You will know them when you can change somebody's life or say something or do something. Please don't miss the boat on it. Because for some of these guys, there's no turning back. Okay? Thank you.
Are there any final suggestions or questions for our discussion? No questions? Any more suggestions? So I'd like to formally thank all of our panelists for coming here today and sharing your experience, and also sharing your loss, and we hold that with you all as we move forward. We hold your loved ones, we hold all of our loved ones who've been impacted by violence, by structural violence or intimate violence. And we stand with you all and we move forward together. Like you said, we're not going to forget the community in our community, forget the people in our community. We are here for each other, like Sam says, whether it's the blackout or anytime we're experiencing poverty, violence, racism, gender-based violence. We need to be here for each other in all of the ways. And it's not just during elections, right? I know there's a lot of talk about representation, and of course representation matters. But the election is going to come and go, and we hope to get people elected, but if we don't, we're still going to be here on the front lines. This work still needs to happen, and we're still going to be fighting, and we're still going to be suffering, but we're still going to be pushing forward. So we invite you to keep pushing with us on the ground, locally, right here in the Jane Finch community. We invite you to become members. Butterfly has a membership. We meet every first and third Wednesday. First Wednesday is like this. We have big open meetings where we talk about issues going on. We talk about different movements. We work on the 15 in Fairness campaign. We're definitely going to be pushing back against these municipal changes. There's a outreach tomorrow at Lawrence West Station between 5 and 7 p.m. in the Edmonton Lawrence area. To deliver a petition to their local PC. The local MP in that area, or MPP, only won by 100 votes. So we need to really hold those MPPs accountable so they can go in and tell Ford, we don't want to make Toronto turn into 25 councillors, because like we said here, we need more representation. So if people are interested in that, you can go there. But our JFAAP membership, Butterfly has in our hands, we need for $2, what you get is monthly meetings. There's food, tokens, but also we're on the ground talking about the local issues that impact our community, not just our community, but communities that look like ours, and also connecting our movement to broader global movements that affect poverty, race, gender, violence, all of these things, because we're not alone in this. As everyone spoke to something a little bit different, but in all of their stories, all of our stories are connected in some way, and we're here to keep talking and keep pushing those conversations forward. So please join us, and thank you all for sharing your stories.
So thank you again for coming. So the next meeting would be the first Wednesday in September. Anybody know the date? The 5th. Okay. So hopefully we'll see you there. That one is our elections, our general membership. And a special thanks, there's two special things. There's a special thanks to the movements locally as well as across the city. Zero gun violence,
I gotta get to the washroom.
Action Against Poverty, Finch Community Family Center, Black Creek Community Health Center. Who else am I missing? The Black Creek Community Healing. Black Creek Community Farm and who? All right. And the residents who do this work in their sleep, in their breath, in everything they do. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, talk to